And when I say shortly, I literally mean moments later, because I'm just doing this all in one session so far. Chapter 2, Atheism as Nature Worship or Neo-Paganism. I don't even know what this is here, but whatever. By nature worship and neo-paganism, I refer to the atheist's tendency to replace a sense of awe of God and seeking transcendence by relating to God with seeking awe and transcendence in nature. Okay, so I don't know much about neo-paganism or nature worship, but I don't think any of that contained anything like nature worship or neo-paganism. This just seems to me like scare quotes, you know, just nature worship and neo-paganism. Oh, it's like saying communism. They're communists. It's just really unconvincing to someone who's in that conversation and you know, not outside looking in, like the people who this article targets are, I assume. This natural high, as it were, is not merely enjoyed, but it is enjoined and said to be holier than theism. See, it's not just enjoyed, but enjoined. A bit full of yourself, Mariano, the author of this article. In a sense, yes, it is holier than theism, if you want to call it holier. Theism is not holy in the slightest, so it's not really that difficult of a contest. Referring to our ability to step off the Earth and look back at ourselves, as was done in Voyager 2, Carl Sagan stated, "I find that a chilling, spine-tingling, exciting, perspective-raising, consciousness-raising experience. It's said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience." And that's my horrible Carl Sagan. I can't help but to hear his voice whenever I see a quote from him. The very first episode of his televised series entitled Cosmos began with Carl Sagan stating, "The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. Our feeblest contemplations of the cosmos stir us. There's a tingling in the spine, a catch in the voice, a faint sensation as of a distant memory, of falling from a height. We know we are approaching the greatest of mysteries." And that's it. They quote two parts of what Sagan said from two different sources, and then they move on. There's no point in those quotes at all, except maybe giving me an opportunity to do my bad Carl Sagan impression. It literally continues, presupposing a God-free reality, which is not what atheists do. Why atheists seek transcendent experiences, which we don't necessarily seek them, but everyone has them, remains unanswered. So why do atheists seek, when they don't, transcendent experiences when they don't, is unanswered. Right. Stupid questions usually are unanswered, because they're stupid questions. Michael Shermer stated that his study of evolution was far more enlightening and transcendent, spiritual, than anything I had experienced in 7 years of being a born-again Christian. Right. He's entitled to his opinion, isn't he? Or isn't he? Evolution is a hell of a lot better, by the way, than Jesus did magic and came back from the dead. When you understand reality on reality's terms, it becomes a hell of a lot more impressive than the primitive stories of superstitious bigots from the Bronze Age. An example I often use at this point is rainbows. A lot of people like to say that if you know how the rainbow is made, it makes it less beautiful. Right. When I see a rainbow, and I'm going for the far more enlightening and transcendent here, as Michael Shermer is saying, when I see a rainbow, what I see isn't just pretty colors holding a pattern in the sky. What I see, because I know how rainbows are made, is I see a sheet of little droplets of water falling from the sky with a beam of light bisecting them as they fall. And that beam of light is split into the prismatic colors at such a way that there's an angle to them, because the different light wavelengths have a different angle of refraction, I think it is, and that causes those light beams to hit the back of my eye at a certain way that it makes these ghostly colors shimmer in the sky. those angles survive for a fraction of a second, because as the beam is coming, the little raindrop goes and it passes through it and it's gone. And it's constantly being replaced by thousands, millions of other droplets all at the same time, all at once for a fraction of a moment, and it's gone. What I see when I look at a rainbow isn't just colors in the sky. I see a symphony of mathematics, a symphony of light being bisected by misshapen prisms caused by condensation that is creating on my eye and on the eye of anyone looking in that direction, although they see it at a different angle than I do. I see a symphony creating an image in my brain. Tell me that that is not more beautiful than, look at the pretty colors! Michael Shermer here thinks that studying evolution is a hell of a lot better than studying the Bible. Guess what? I agree with him. Look at the pretty colors! Look how much Jesus loves you! Isn't very much enlightening or transcendent, in my opinion. You may have a different opinion. That's why it's an opinion. But if you really look at it, if you really learn about what's going on in the world, you're bound to be more impressed than what ignorant people thousands of years ago just made up because they didn't understand it. Michael Shermer made reference to the spiritual side of science, which he referred to as scienceality. It's kind of a weird word, I have to say. If religion, and quoting Michael Shermer here, if religion and spirituality are supposed to generate awe and humility in the fact of their creator, what could be more awesome and humbling than the deep space discovered by Hubble and the cosmologists, and the deep time discovered by Darwin and the evolutionists? Darwin matters because evolution matters. Evolution matters because science matters. And science matters because it is the preeminent story of our age, an epic saga about who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. Right. And most importantly, it's the preeminent story of our age based on reality, not on what stupid people made up thousands of years ago. Not on ghosts, not on magic, not on witches, which never existed, but on reality. Michael Ruse, philosophy professor, University of Guelph, or Guelph. I don't know how that's pronounced, I apologize. Ardent evolutionist, because of course you have evolutionists and then you have ardent evolutionists, or as they're also known, evolutionists. And professedly an ex-Christian who has argued for the ACLU. Oh, the case is getting made strongly against the integrity of this guy. He argued for the ACLU, the Civil Liberties Union, because how dare people fight for civil liberties. Has argued for the ACLU against the balanced treatment of creation and evolution in schools bill in the USA, wrote, evolution is promoted by its practitioners as more than mere science. Is it? I don't think so. Evolution is promulgated as an ideology, a secular religion. Is it? I don't think so. A full-fledged alternative to Christianity. Is it? I don't think so. With meaning and morality. Well, no, evolution does give us an answer to that question, where did we come from? A real question, not just something somebody made up. It does tell us where we came from, and it does explain to some extent how morality may have developed in our species and in all the other species alive today on the earth. But a full-fledged alternative to Christianity, I don't necessarily believe that that's correct. And this is the ardent evolutionist and professedly ex-Christian who has argued for the ACLU I'm disagreeing with. This was true of evolution, continuing his quote here, this was true of evolution in the beginning, and it is true of evolution still today. Maybe. I don't know. I don't care. As a social reformer, therefore, Huxley, known in the papers as Pope Huxley, was he? So what? Was determined to find a substitute for Christianity. Maybe he was. I don't give a fuck. Evolution, with its stress on unbroken law, which could be used to reflect messages of social progress, was the perfect candidate. Maybe it was for Huxley. I don't know. I'm not Huxley, and none of this matters to me. Life is on an upwardly moving escalator. Not really. I mean, we continue to advance, but it's more like a rolling floor, not an escalator. We're not developing into superior beings or anything. We're just evolving, changing. It doesn't mean we're changing to become better, faster, stronger, harder, or whatever. And I know I got the order wrong. It just means we're evolving, we're changing. It's not an upwardly moving escalator, but it certainly is moving, and it's moving only in one direction. And even though you can have atavisms, the evolution only goes in one direction. Change, not change backwards, but change. To be accurate, though, it is possible for a species to, and I'm just making this up here, develop wings, lose wings, and get wings again. But that doesn't mean they went backwards in their evolution. They just changed one way and then dipped another way, and it's always going forward. So it's not I would not describe it as an upwardly moving escalator. But hey, if Michael Ruse feels like it, good for him. Still continuing his quote here, it's 4 paragraphs. We're on paragraph 3 here. Indeed, recognizing that a good religion needs a moral message, a good religion might, it would be nice to have one of those, as well as a history and promise of future reward. Not necessary, but I guess most do, so okay. Huxley increasingly turned from Darwin, who was not very good at providing these things because he wasn't supposed to. He was not intending to provide a religion, but instead he was explaining how life diversified. Towards another English evolutionist, Herbert Spencer. Who the fuck is that? I don't know. Prolific writer and immensely popular philosopher to the masses. Right. So a pop philosophy writer from around the time of Darwin, or maybe before. There's no date on Herbert Spencer's life here, so I don't know. Okay. Herbert Spencer, etc., shared Huxley's vision of evolution as a kind of metaphysics rather than a straight science. Well, good for them. Who the fuck cares? Evolution now has its, still continuing, evolution now has its mystical visionary, it's St. John of the Cross. I'm just really getting annoyed by Ruse at this point. Harvard entomologist and sociobiologist Edward O. Wilson tells us that we now have an alternative mythology to defeat traditional religion. Well, we certainly have an alternative to defeat religion with. I would not call evolution, the fact, a mythology. If people want to make a religion of evolution, that is their business. Yes, I agree with this. Finally, something I can agree with. The important point is that we should recognize when people are going beyond the strict science, moving into moral and social claims, thinking of their theory as an all-embracing world picture. Yeah, we should recognize when people are going beyond the strict science. We really should. And clearly Huxley wasn't, or didn't. Neither did Spencer, or Edward O. Wilson. They didn't. What's your point? And I'm asking that of the article because it quotes all that. He argued against a balanced treatment in schools, blah blah blah. Addressing fellow atheist Jonathan Miller, Richard Dawkins stated, yes, it moves on again, it just quotes a bunch of nonsense and moves on. Scary, scary! That's what I call it when you just say a bunch of stuff that's meant to terrify and confuse and actually accomplish nothing. It's just, scary, scary! And then someone else said, scary, scary! So Richard Dawkins stated, again, 3 paragraphs this time, and they're long ones. You and I probably do have feelings that may well be akin to a kind of mystical wonder when we contemplate the stars, when we contemplate the galaxies, when we contemplate life, the sheer expanse of geological time. I experience, and I expect you experience, internal feelings which sound pretty much like what mystics feel, and they call it God. If, and I've been called a very religious person for that reason, if I am called a religious person, then my retort to that is, well, you're playing with words, because what the vast majority of people mean by religious is something utterly different from this sort of transcendent mystical experience. Yes, the author of this article was so stupid that he did not cut out the part that contradicts the point he hasn't stated he's making, but he's driving at in this entire section. If you want to call me religious, Fine, but that's not what people mean by the word religious at all. There's a bit cut, continuing the transcendent sense, the transcendent mystic sense, that people who are both religious and non-religious in my usage of the term, is something very, very different. In that sense, I probably am a religious person. Oh, you see, Dawkins said he is religious. Except he qualified it by saying he's not for reasons that he explained, but hey, he said he's religious. Quote mine, quote mine. You probably are a religious person. But that doesn't mean we think that there is a supernatural being that interferes with the world, that does anything, that manipulates anything, or, by the way, that it's worth praying to or asking forgiveness of sins from, etc. I probably am religious, but that doesn't mean I believe in a God. So what do you think that infers, Mariano, author of this article? It probably infers that you're quoting Dawkins here, in your scary, scary fashion, as a pile of bullshit that you can just throw at your follower and say, look, it's icky. I prefer to use words like religion, like God, in the way that the vast majority of people in the world will understand them, not in the way that Mariano, the author of this article, is implying that they are using it, and to reserve a different kind of language for the feeling that we share with possibly your clergyman. The sense of wonder that one gets as a scientist contemplating the cosmos or contemplating mitochondria is actually much grander than anything that you will get by contemplating the traditional objects of religious mysticism. As I said before with my my personal rainbow analogy, I guess, understanding mitochondria, understanding how the universe works, is a hell of a lot more impressive than a guy spat in dirt and rubbed it on some blind guy's face and he was not blind anymore. Wow! Tell me how spitting in dirt cures blindness, and then I might be impressed. Maybe I just have a higher standard for what impresses me. But then that doesn't explain why religious people aren't just brain-sploding all over the place when someone explains things like how electricity works. There's a little note here at the end of this quote. The unbracketed ellipses, if you're reading with me, appear in the original transcript, denoting Richard Dawkins' halting way of speaking. The bracketed ones were added. So there are ellipses, ... where Dawkins pauses, and he does that a lot, as do I. But there are some bracketed ellipses that were added by the person who edited this to maybe save space or to cut out points that they felt contradicted them without cutting out all of the ones that contradicted them. Again, Richard Dawkins, and yes, a lot of what follows is just quoting and quoting and quoting and quoting and quoting. Richard Dawkins, in Is Science a Religion, said, "Science does have some of religion's virtues. All the great religions have a place for awe, for ecstatic transport at the wonder and beauty of creation." Of creation, and this is actually a link to creation.com, because he called everything creation, therefore God. Right? Right? Right, guys? Right? There's no one there. And it's exactly this feeling of spine-shivering, breath-catching awe, almost worship. See? This flooding of the chest with ecstatic wonder that modern science can provide. See my rainbow example. When I look at a rainbow, I really do feel these things. It's like, wow, look at all that math happening. There's no way I can understand it, there's no way I can calculate it, but in my head I see how complex and elaborate the formation of a rainbow is. So yeah, it is almost worship. It is a flooding of the chest with ecstatic wonder. And it does so, continuing the quote here, and it does so beyond the wildest dreams of saints and mystics. Do you think any saint, any mystic, ever looked at a rainbow and saw how beautiful it was the way I do? Probably not. Or they were really high on magic mushrooms. Science can offer a vision of life and the universe which, as I've already remarked, for humbling poetic inspiration, far outclasses any of the mutually contradictory faiths and disappointingly recent traditions of the world's religions. I agree with that. The universe at large couldn't possibly be anything other than indifferent to Christ, his birth, his passion, and his death. The universe is gigantic. We're one tiny planet around one tiny star in one galaxy that is completely unremarkable compared to other galaxies. What difference does one story about one guy coming back from the dead, believed only by one group of cultists, what difference does that make in the grand scheme of things? Well, nothing at all. It's completely irrelevant to practically anything at all. I want to return now to the charge that science is just a faith. The more extreme version of that charge, and one that I often encounter as both a scientist and a rationalist, and that I personally encounter as an outspoken atheist on YouTube, is an accusation of zealotry and bigotry in scientists themselves, as great as that found in religious people. Right. A lot of people say science is a faith, and scientists are bigoted, or they presuppose a non-existence of God. The presupposition thing came up earlier in chapter 1, I think. No, we don't presuppose anything. Science and our awe at the discoveries of science is a conclusion. Religion is a preconceived notion, a presupposition. They do presuppose the existence of God. We don't presuppose the non-existence of God, and we don't presuppose the existence of God. We look at what we have, and we form conclusions based on that. This is true of scientists, of rationalists, and of just average schlubs like me who just find rainbows to be way more impressive than pretty colors in the sky. Sometimes there may be a little bit of justice in this accusation. Correct. There may be a little bit of accuracy in the claim that scientists are zealoted or bigoted in some fashion, but it certainly isn't to the point where, well, Dawkins makes the point for me and the rest of it, so I'll let him finish. But as zealous bigots, we scientists are mere amateurs at the game. We're content, to argue with those who disagree with us. We don't kill them. So thank you, Dawkins, for making my point for me. And thanks, Mariano, for leaving that part of the quote in the thing you're quoting to prove how evil atheism is. Stephen S. Hall, and I don't know who that is, in Darwin's Rottweiler, Sir Richard Dawkins, evolution's fiercest champion, far too fierce, said. If that's the whole title of a book, or an article, or I don't know, then that's really fucking long. Okay. Einsteinian religion is, and I promise we're almost through these quotes, so I apologize, but that's what the article gives me to work with. Einsteinian religion is a kind of spirituality which is non-supernatural. And that doesn't mean that it's somehow less than supernatural religion. Correct. Supernatural religion is completely fucking stupid. And people think it's really fancy and really awesome, and they're wrong, but Einsteinian religion, just because it doesn't have scary or God loves you or that kind of bullshit, it doesn't make it any less impressive than they think their bullshit is. Quite the contrary, Einstein was adamant in rejecting all ideas of a personal God. The famous quote that begins with, "It is of course a lie what you have heard about my religious convictions," or something like that. A lot of people say, Einstein believed in God. No, he didn't. It is something bigger, something grander, something that I believe any scientist can subscribe to, including those scientists who I would call atheists. Einstein, in my terms, was an atheist, although Einstein, of course, was very fond of using the word God. When Einstein would use the word God, he was using it as a kind of figure of speech. Correct, he was. When he said things like, God is subtle, but he's not malicious, or he does not play dice, or did God have a choice in creating the universe? What he meant was that things like randomness do not lie at the heart of all things. Could the universe have been any other way than the way it is? Einstein chose to use the word God to phrase such profound, deep questions. That, it seems to me, is the good part of religion which we can all subscribe to. And yes, I do agree with this. If we use God the way Einstein was using God as a shortcut to ask really meaningful questions, Sure, use that. It doesn't mean we believe that science is a god or any of the other stupid accusations that are thrown at us. What I can't understand is why we are expected to show respect for good scientists, even great scientists, who at the same time believe in a God who does things like listen to our prayers, forgive our sins, perform cheap miracles, which go against, presumably, everything that the God of the physicist, the divine cosmologist, set up when he set up his great laws of nature. So I don't understand a scientist who says, I am a Roman Catholic or I am a Baptist, and neither do I. Take, again, Francis Collins. Dr. Francis Collins, the former head of the Human Genome Project. Brilliant person, but he becomes a complete simpleton when it comes to his religion. He not only believes in evolution, but he helped prove it in a way that just boggles the mind, that someone like me who isn't really too familiar with that conversation at that depth just can barely address. He is so knowledgeable about evolution, but he still believes that a Jewish Arab some 2,000 years ago died and came back from the dead with magic, and that all of humanity is descended from the incestuous relations of a dirt man and a rib woman, to borrow a phrase. It's how does he go there? He's intelligent. There's no argument that can be made about Francis Collins not being intelligent. He's brilliant. Sure, absolutely. But he believes something that is so completely fucking stupid. How does he do that? I don't see how I can respect him when he says he believes in Jesus. I can respect him for his intellect and his accomplishments in the fields of science, but I can't respect him when he says he believes in Jesus because of the contemporary writings, as he said to Bill Maher in Religulous. Contemporary writings which, by the way, don't exist, and Bill Maher pointed it out. I suppose my hope would be that science, the best kind of science, the sort of science which approaches the best sort of religion, the non-existent religion that we could all get behind, but sadly hasn't been invented yet, the Einsteinian spirituality that I was talking about is so inspiring, so exciting that it should be sellable to everybody. It should be. Hell, just evolution is so exciting, it's so inspiring, it should be sellable to everybody. The problem is a lot of people don't know what the fuck they should buy. We have something far better to offer. Why are we free-thinking secular scientists not getting into that same marketplace and selling what we've got to sell? Because it's a far better product, and all we've got to do is hone our salesmanship to the level that they are already doing it. Italics in original. And there's a few parts that are already in italics, so they're just pointing it out here. Yeah, scientists aren't getting to the same marketplace and selling the far superior and far more interesting positions of science. It probably has to do, not because it's a far better product, it is a far better product, but it's because religious people are so fucking dishonest about what they're selling. They lie about what evolution is. They say anyone who doesn't believe is going to get tortured. There's threats. There has been historically more than just threats. There has been violence. There has been killing. There has been burning at the stake. There has been lawsuits. This is Galileo, who refused to accept the radical notion that the Earth goes around the sun as being false, as said in the Bible or whatever. The reason science isn't selling as well as religion is because religion makes people stupid, and it loves stupid people, and only intelligent people can get science. Such sentiments appear to be fulfillments of the Apostle Paul's reference to Romans 1:18b to 28 in the ESV. English Standard Version? I don't know. Blah 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 Bible quote, fuck you, I don't give a fuck what your Bible says. Pretty much every religion says that we'll be oppressed, we'll be hated, people will tell us we're wrong. Scientology does it. Does that prove that Scientology is correct? No. Every religion forms this defensive barrier against itself, a defensive ball curl, if you're a fan of Ramis as I am. It creates this protective shield around itself that says, we know the truth and they're all trying to get us. It's the persecution complex all over again. That doesn't make you right. It just means religions knew enough by the point this was invented to know that a really good way of getting people to stay on your side is telling them, we're right, but everyone hates you for it. 2.1, atheist religion. And I really wish I could skip this part here because it's completely irrelevant, but going part by part, let us consider the atheists from the 18th to the 21st centuries. Remember those dates, from the 18th century to the 21st century. So clearly there must have been atheists all throughout those centuries, right? Who expressed desires to establish an atheistic religion. We're back to that again. Perhaps we should begin with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 1712 to 1778, the 18th century, who conceived of a civil religion. Oh, how I would love to see a civilized religion. There is therefore a purely civil profession of faith, of which the sovereign... Wait, I'm doing this wrong. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. There is therefore a purely civil profession of faith, of which the sovereign should fix the articles, not exactly as religious dogmas, but as social sentiments, without which a man cannot be a good citizen or a faithful subject. While it can compel no one to believe them, it can banish from the state whoever does not believe them. It can banish him not for impiety, but as an anti-social being, incapable of truly loving the laws and justice, and of sacrificing at need his life to his duty. If anyone, after publicly recognizing these dogmas, behaves as if he does not believe them, let him be punished by death. He has committed the worst of all crimes, that of lying before the law. And I apologize if the French accent I was borrowing there made it a little bit difficult to read. I strongly encourage you to go to the article, chapter 2.1. It's the first block quote. That description there is not of an atheist religion or of a civil religion, but of how society should work. Let me start over here. And I'll just replace the key words to show you what I mean here. There is therefore a purely civil profession of faith, of which the sovereign should fix the articles, not exactly as religious dogmas, but as social sentiments, without which a man cannot be a good citizen or a faithful subject. While it can compel no one to believe the law, it can banish from the law, from the state, whoever does not accept the law. It can banish him not for impiety, but as an antisocial being, incapable of truly loving the laws and justice, and of sacrificing at need his life to his duty. Although that's kind of conscription, and conscription is bad. If anyone, after publicly recognizing these laws, behaves as if he does not accept them, let him be punished by death or prison. He has committed the worst of all crimes, that of breaking the law. I've only replaced a few words here, but to me that block quote is about forming a civil society. It borrows terminology from a religion, sure, but am I really way off here? I mean, when I read this the first time, it really struck me as a description of how to create a working society. I think the United States was formed in 1776, so this is just 2 years. He died 2 years after the creation of the United States, using a set of laws that is basically this. So maybe I'm way off here, but am I? I don't know. Two other notable 18th century attempts are Claude-Henri de Rouvroy, Comte de Saint-Simon, 1760 to 1825, who would have, of course, come a mere 18 years before Jean-Jacques Rousseau's death, who conceived of a new Christianity which would be founded upon humanism and scientific socialism. Wow, would that have ever been a good thing for humanity. The secular priesthood would consist of scientists, philosophers, and engineers. I guess he had to include engineers. Lastly, Auguste Comte, 1798 to 1857, conceived of a religion of humanity. And that's it. He conceived of a religion of humanity, and... Okay, what is that religion of humanity? Why is it wrong? Why is it so evil? Are you just not quoting it because you know it would make your religion look pathetically evil? And notice, 3 from the 18th century. The latest one is died in 1857, so I guess it's slightly 19th century. Forwarding to the 21st century, what? Could you not find someone from the 16th, maybe the 14th century to prove your point? Did you have to go to the first examples you can find, followed by, let's fast forward to Sam Harris? And it's not even Sam Harris, it's Gary Wolfe's interview with Sam Harris. And I actually looked up who Gary Wolfe is, because he comes up over and over in this article. I don't remember what I looked up, but why are we seeing Gary Wolfe's interview with Sam Harris? He's not even quoting Harris, he's quoting Gary Wolfe quoting Harris, and he doesn't make direct quotes in this following paragraph. You'll see as I start reading. It just really reeks to me of blatant dishonesty. We discuss what it might look like, this world without God. There would be a religion of reason, Harris says. We would have realized the rational means to maximize human happiness. We may all agree that we want to have a Sabbath that we take really seriously, a lot more seriously than most religious people take it. But it would be a rational decision, and it would not be just because it's in the Bible. We would be able to invoke the power of poetry and ritual and silent contemplation and all the variables of happiness so that we could exploit them. Call it prayer, but we would have put prayer without bullshit, and shit is starred out here. At some point there's going to be enough pressure that it is just going to be too embarrassing to believe in God. So I held my fingers up around what I assume is directly Harris's quote. But why bring Gary Wolfe's sentence at the very beginning, if that's the case? Why not just quote Harris? Because they're quoting Gary Wolfe again in an interview with Daniel Dennett. Immediately below. Dennett tells me that he takes very seriously the risk of over-reliance on thought. This clearly appeals to creationists, over-reliance on thought being risky. It interests me that, though Dennett is an atheist, he does not see faith merely as a useless vestige of our primitive nature. Thank you for admitting that it is a useless vestige of our primitive nature in most people's minds, something we can, with effort, intellectualize away. No rational creature, he says, would be able to do without unexamined sacred things. I disagree. Although, I disagree kind of because it's not supported enough by evidence. Dennett says this, and I can see that he might be right, but I also don't see that he's made his case strongly at this point. This sounds to me a little like the religion of reason that Harris foresees. So again, it's Daniel Dennett as referenced or referred to slightly by Gary Wolfe. Yes, quoting Dennett here, yes, there could be a rational religion, Dennett says. We could have a rational policy not even to think about certain things. We could? Don't think about a purple rhinoceros. Damn it, you failed! And so did I. He understands that this would create constant tension between prohibition and curiosity. But the borders of our sacred beliefs could be well guarded simply by acknowledging that it is pragmatic to refuse to change them. For instance, gravity is a pulling force. It is pragmatic for us to refuse to change our belief of gravity as a pulling force to a pushing force. It is practical. We're not prohibiting anyone from doing it. It just doesn't serve any purpose to do that. And in fact, a pushing force has more trouble to explain what we observe of reality than gravity as a pulling force. So, in this sense, I guess we could turn that into a sacred belief that gravity is a pulling force, but why? Why would we do that? I mean, we don't hold that gravity is a pulling force because it is a sacred truth. It just represents reality better. And you can think that it doesn't, but you'd be wrong. And you're welcome to think about it as much as you want and talk about it as much as you want. Here's a pencil, here's paper, do your math for gravity as a pushing force. We'll wait. Not convinced. I asked Dennett if there might not be contradiction in his scheme. On the one hand, he aggressively confronts the faithful, attacking their sacred beliefs. Yeah, your sacred beliefs are based on bullshit and wrong. On the other hand, he proposes that our inherited defaults be put outside the limits of dispute. Who's going to dispute that gravity is a pulling force? I mean, some people might. They're welcome to do it. They're welcome to try. Just like creationists are welcome to say that evolution is a hoax. No one's prohibiting you from thinking that, from arguing that. You're just way off because evidence. But this would make our defaults into a religion, unimpeachable and implacable gods. No, it wouldn't. Making gravity a sacred belief as a pull force doesn't make it into a god. And besides, are we not atheists? Says Gary Wolfe, who most definitely is not. Sacred prohibitions are anathema to us. Dennett replies that exceptions can be made. This is a huge problem. Exceptions? Not in my Christianity. Philosophers are the ones who refuse to accept the sacred values, he says. Sure, let's have a bunch of sacred beliefs, such as gravity is a pulling force. But let's ask philosophers to maybe do thought exercises about gravity as a pushing force. Did I say gravity as a push? Gravity as a pulling force. Let's have philosophers maybe exercise what the universe would look like as a pushing force. Or maybe how many angels can tap dance on the head of a pin. Let them explore those thoughts. Let them waste their time if there is in fact time wasted on such thoughts. Perhaps such wasteful thoughts will eventually lead to something useful. That's why it's great to have someone thinking that way. But for the most part, it is pragmatic to not really question how many angels can tap dance on the head of a pin, or to think of gravity as a pushing force, or to anything else. So why not have philosophers who question these things, unchallenged, without risk of being burnt at the stake as heretics? Sure, I'm with Dennett 100% here at this point. For instance, Socrates. I find this answer supremely odd. The image of an atheist religion whose sacred objects, called defaults, are taboo for all except philosophers. Daniel Dennett here never said make them taboos. He just said we create a pragmatic reason not to question them. As long as it's useful, we don't really change our mind. It's not a taboo. It's not, don't talk about sex ever, because hell. It's just, leave one group talking about it, and it's not the same thing as taboo. This is why I think Gary Wolfe is extremely dishonest. Taboo for all except philosophers. This is the material of the cruelest parody, says a cruel parody of an interviewer. But that's not what Dennett means. Thanks for admitting it. In his scenario, the philosophers are not revered authorities, but mental risk-takers and scouts. An excellent definition. Yeah, let them take the risk of thinking things that are stupid, of exploring areas of thought that are currently viewed as being ridiculous, and maybe coming to a hidden spring, a wellspring somewhere that they can drink of. Let them explore, let them think, let them be mental risk takers and scouts. Go ahead. Their adventures, continuing here, their adventures invite ridicule or worse. No, ridicule, yes, or worse, that's religion. Philosophers should expect to be hooted at and reviled, Dennett says. And Dennett is a philosopher. What do you think that means? Ask yourself, really, a philosopher like Dennett saying that philosophers should expect to be hooted at and reviled, what do you think that means? It means he probably knows how silly his philosophers in this hypothetical world would seem to be to the majority. But he's okay with it, and so am I, because although they might think ridiculous things, they still would serve some purpose more than any priest in the world today. Another quote, Sam Harris, selfless consciousness without faith. As I sat and gazed upon the surrounding hills gently sloping to an inland sea, a feeling of peace came over me. It soon grew to blissful stillness that silenced my thoughts. In an instant, In an instant, the sense of being a separate self, an I or me, vanished. Everything was as it had been, the cloudless sky, the pilgrims clutching their bottles of water, but I no longer felt like I was separate from the scene, peering out at the world from behind my eyes. Only the world remained. As someone who is simply making his best effort to be a rational human being, I am very slow to draw metaphysical conclusions from experiences of this sort. And yet, religious people, such as Mariano, the author of this article, love just jumping to those conclusions, without even having any reason to. There's no question that people have spiritual experiences. I use words like spiritual and mystical in scare quotes because they come to us trailing a long tail of metaphysical debris. While most of us go through life feeling like we are the thinker of our thoughts and the experiencer of our experience, from the perspective of science we know that this is a false view. Correct. This is exactly why, and Eric Hovind completely failed to grasp this point when Thunderfoot explained it to him, the reason why we cannot say we know for sure the universe exists. We experience it through our senses, and our senses are plugged into our brain, and our brain is a model-making machine. We don't see the universe as it is. When you look at a tree, the tree doesn't enter into your consciousness and reveal to you its presence. You are just seeing light bouncing off of it from the sun into the back of your eyeball. We know, therefore, that it's a false view to think that we directly experience the universe and that we're plugged into everything, or that we're separate and, you know, there's a little guy sitting in our head looking through a TV screen with our eyes as the cameras. That's just not the case. We might feel that way, but it is not a true fact. Continuing here, there's no discrete self or ego lurking like a minotaur in the labyrinth of the brain, and I love this sentence. There's no region of cortex or stream of neural processing that occupies a privileged position with respect to our personhood. There's no unchanging center of narrative gravity. As a critic of religious faith, I am often asked what will replace organized religion. The answer is many things and nothing. But what about ethics and spiritual experience? For many, religion still appears the only vehicle for what is most important in life: love, compassion, morality, and self-transcendence. Contrary to the evidence in most of those cases. Love me and only me, or else I punish you forever with torture, says the loving God. Compassion, every sin is the same as every other sin, and all sins deserve death and eternal torture. Compassion. Morality, do as I say or else, not morality. And self-transcendence, you were made by God in order to suck his dick forever. Read Revelation chapter 4 for that one. To change this, we need a way of talking about human well-being that is as unconstrained by religious dogma as science is. I believe that most people are interested in spiritual life. Maybe not most, but I'll grant the point, whether they realize it or not. I can't really answer to that. It kind of defeats itself, but hey, maybe he's right. I don't know. I don't care. Every one of us has been born to seek happiness in a condition that is fundamentally unreliable. Pretty much. It's a little bit bleak to state it that way, but it is mostly true. On the question of how to be most happy, the contemplative life has some important insights to offer. And I guess I agree with that. If you spend all your time just running in every direction trying to be happy just by luck, good luck winning that lottery. But if you actually stop and think about how to be most happy, you might get some important insights that way. Sam Harris again, a contemplative science. I recently spent a week with 100 fellow scientists at a retreat center in rural Massachusetts. The meeting attracted a diverse group: physicists, neuroscientists, psychologists, clinicians, and a philosopher too, all devoted to the study of the human mind. We were on a silent meditation retreat at the Insight Meditation Society and engaged in a Buddhist practice known as Vipassana, the Pali word for seeing clearly. Of critical importance for the purpose of science, there are no unjustified beliefs or metaphysics that need be adopted at all. Yeah, you do not ever need to adopt any unjustified beliefs. Even the existence of the universe that I previously stated is impossible to prove. We don't adopt that as an unjustified belief. We adopt that because it is justified. There, I just justified the existence of the universe to some extent, and it serves a hell of a lot more purpose than that was fake. That never actually happened. I'm not even here right now, and there's no camera, and you're not even you don't even exist. Everything is false. Is an unjustified belief, and there's no point in adopting that one. Research on the functional effects of meditation is still in its infancy, but there seems to be little question that the practice changes the brain. ABC Radio National, yes, make that and move on. This is the pattern for chapter 2 of this article. Just quote something and move on without making a point. It's almost Pendletonian in its nature. John Morris Pendleton, I love you so much, you stupid bastard. ABC Radio National, Stephen Crittenden interviews Sam Harris. Quote, ellipses, mysticism is a real psychological phenomenon that I have no doubt it genuinely transforms people, but it seems to me that we can promulgate that knowledge and pursue those experiences very much in the spirit of science without presupposing anything on insufficient evidence. Basically, mysticism is something that happens. People do have mystical experiences. That doesn't make Jesus real, is what this is basically saying. And we can find out why people have mystical experiences without presupposing that God is magic. Sam Harris again, because this is the Sam Harris chapter, I guess. Science must destroy religion. Faith is nothing more than the license that religious people give one another to believe such propositions when reasons fail. Scientists and other rational people will need to find new ways of talking about ethics and spiritual experience. The distinction between science and religion is not a matter of excluding our ethical intuitions and non-ordinary states of consciousness from our conversation about the world. It is a matter of our being rigorous about what is reasonable to conclude on their basis. Basically, people have mystical experiences. We shouldn't say, "Oh, that's mysterious, I better believe in God or I'll go to hell." We should try to understand what's actually going on. We must find ways of meeting our emotional needs that do not require the abject embrace of the preposterous. I could not have phrased that better if I tried. We must learn to invoke the power of ritual. I don't really agree with that one, although some people find ritual very important. And to mark those transitions in every human life that demand profundity, birth, marriage, death, etc. Why? Simple as that. Why? Why should we learn to invoke the power of ritual to mark transitions in every human life that demand profundity? Why does birth demand profundity? Why does marriage demand profundity? Why does death demand profundity? I'm not saying they don't. I just want to know why they do. And we should be rigorous in pursuing this conclusion on the basis, etc., what he just said. Without lying to ourselves about the nature of reality. So, yeah, birth, marriage, death, etc., these may demand profundity, but let's not lie to ourselves about how, oh, it's important because God. Conclusion based on the arguments, not on pulling it out of your ass, please, as religious people do. I am hopeful that the necessary transformation in our thinking will come about as our scientific understanding of ourselves matures, and it is for most people who are not religious. For people who are religious, they tend not to be religious for very long after that. When we find reliable ways to make human beings more loving, less fearful, and genuinely enraptured by the fact of our appearance in the cosmos, rainbows, we will have no need for divisive religious myths. Agree 100%. Sam Harris, yes, quote, move on. Another quote. Sam Harris, Rational Mysticism in the End of Faith. I use the word, why are they quoting this as being from Rational Mysticism and then saying it's in the End of Faith? This article sometimes just really, again, brain gears clanging to a stop. I use the word spirituality and mysticism affirmatively in an attempt to put the range of human experience signified by these terms on a rational footing. This enterprise is not a problem with my book, or merely with Flynn, I guess that's why they quoted it, but a larger problem with secularism itself, secularism being nothing more than the totality of such criticism can lead its practitioners to reject important features of human experience simply because they have been traditionally associated with religious practice. Not necessarily. While things like seeing God can be dismissed because it's traditionally been associated with religious practice, secularism is not such a thing. We reject the nature, the religious connotation of those events, but we don't necessarily reject that they happen. Our conventional sense of self is in fact nothing more than a cognitive illusion, and dispelling this illusion opens the mind to extraordinary experience of happiness. Maybe. I don't know. I don't care. This is not a proposition to be accepted on faith. It is an empirical observation, says Harris. I don't feel that he's made his case in all the stuff I've seen of Harris. Maybe he has, but so far I disagree. The only faith required to get such a project off the ground is the faith of scientific hypothesis. The hypothesis is this: if I use my attention in the prescribed way, it may have a specific reproducible effect. Needless to say, what happens, or fails to happen, along any path of spiritual practice has to be interpreted in light of some conceptual scheme, and everything must remain open to rational discussion. Agree entirely. How this discussion proceeds will ultimately be decided by contemplative scientists, who will, in blocks here because they're adding it for clarity, who will develop a mature science of the mind. Sure. The problem, however, is that there is a kernel of truth in the grandiosity and otherworldly language of religion, but it is not the kernel of truth that people like Mariano, the author of this article, believes it is. People have weird experiences. That doesn't make Jesus turn water into wine. Most atheists appear to be certain that this consciousness is entirely dependent upon and reducible to the workings of the brain. Yes, I think I would agree with that statement. I think I agree with the conclusion as well, that consciousness is entirely dependent upon and reducible to the workings of the brain. Just like the working of a computer and the fact that I can play Crisis is dependent upon and reducible to the workings of a computer. You can do a hell of a lot more with it, but it's ultimately all in the brain, I think. However, of course, I am not a scientist of the mind. It's just the conclusion that seems most well supported at this point. In the last chapter of the book, In the End of Faith, I briefly argue that this certainty is unwarranted. I disagree, as I just said. The truth is that scientists still do not know what the relationship between consciousness and matter is. I think Phineas Gage would disagree with that. The guy who had a spike pushed through his brain survived and became a completely different person. I am not in the least suggesting that we make a religion out of this uncertainty or do anything else with it, and yet that's precisely what religious people have done, always. And the final quote, and there's no point made at all here, it's just a final quote, that's it. Humanist Manifesto 1, 1933 states, why are we quoting this? Who wrote it? Why? What context? In response to what? And what's the point? But then that question applies to all of chapter 2.1 or 2.2, whatever I'm at here. Whatever. Continuing, quoting Humanist Manifesto, in order that religious humanism may be better understood, we, the undersigned, so it's a petition, it's an affirmation, desire to make certain affirmations which we believe the facts of our contemporary life demonstrate, which requires a new statement of the means and purposes of religion. Such a vital, fearless, and frank religion, capable of furnishing adequate social goals and personal satisfactions, may appear to many people as a complete break with the past. To establish such a religion is a major necessity of the present. It is a responsibility which rests upon this generation. Well, given that this was written in 1933, I think they kind of failed that, but I agree that, yes, we should get rid of religions that are based on scary and God will torture you forever, because that's just plain evil. And that is the end of chapter 2. A whole bunch of annoying quotes with no point. I've read this twice so far, once in my initial read-through, and now again, and I still don't know what the fuck the point of Chapter 2 is. I'm staring right now at the beginning of Chapter 3, and I'm actually going to scroll up here to see what the point of Chapter 2 is. Oh, atheism as nature worship or neo-paganism. How is that related or relevant to the quotes I've been reading so far? I ask you, the viewer, because I certainly have no fucking clue what the point of any of that bullshit that I quoted was. So, I apologize for how horrible that was, but I just had to read all of it because that's the purpose of this video. I'll take a drink and I'll be back within a minute to continue with Chapter 3. See you then.